My name is Stephanie Allais. I am a professor here in the School of Education and the Research Chair of Skills Development. And I am going to be chairing this morning's panel. So you will hear more from me, and I will give you more information about the panel as we proceed. But for now, I would like to hand over to our head of school, Professor Juliet Paramal, who has very recently taken over at the Wits School of Education. We are really, really pleased to have her as our head of school. We're really pleased to have her here to welcome you all to this event.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, families, partners, patrons of the Wits Center for Research, Education and Labor. It is my singular pleasure as the newly appointed head of the Wits School of Education to welcome you to this two-day event, a really auspicious event that the Real Center has organized in celebration of its 10th anniversary. This is truly a season of congratulations and sweet celebrations, if you remember that Cliff Richard song. And because it coincides with the University of Witwatersrand also turning a grand old 100 years old. And thus, as the Wits celebrates 100 years of excellence, the Center for Research, Education and Labor celebrates 10 years of researching educational preparation for work and skills for an equitable, just, and sustainable future. In 2012, REAL took over the baton from the Wits Education Policy Unit, and the EPU was founded in 1987 to provide a scholarly context for the development of education policy in post-apartheid South Africa. With the transition to South African democracy in 1994, the EPU boasted an enviable track record of supporting the government in its attempt to improve the provision of education for its citizens. So building on the remarkable gains of the EPU, a decade ago, the REAL Center was launched as a fully fledged center. At the time of its launch, the REAL Center aimed to conduct research into the complex interplay between education, knowledge, work, the economy, and society through theoretical, empirical, and policy-based inquiry. In the next 2 days, REAL will reflect, review, revel, and rejoice over the corpus of sterling work it has accomplished, while also keeping a keen prospective gaze on what it hopes to accomplish in the next 10 years and into the next century. As a vibrant and viable center in the Wits School of Education, I am extremely proud, the school is extremely proud, that REAL has established itself as an entity that stands tall as a national center of excellence, engaging in cutting-edge research, offering teaching programs which develop the professional capacity of practitioners, collaborating and supporting community and sector-related initiatives while developing a cadre of researchers. I would thus like to reiterate a very warm welcome to the Wits School of Education, to all of you who have taken time off from your busy schedule to join us at REAL in celebrating a decade of excellence. A special word of congratulations to the remarkable colleagues and staff who bring such honor to the REAL and to the Wits School of Education. Dr. Presha Ramsarup, the director of the center, Professor Stephanie Allais, who is the South African Chair of Skills Development, Professor Peliwe Lolwana, who has recently retired but remains as an associate. And then, of course, there's Victor, and there's Ruan, and there's Temba, Kate, Cynthia, Mengena, the associates. I know Yael, shout out to Yael and to Volker. There are other people in the room. Pardon me if I don't acknowledge you, but we certainly acknowledge your contribution to REAL. And then, of course, all of the postgrad research fellows and everybody who really contributes towards making REAL shine. I also want to extend a very special welcome to Mr. Rudi Dicks from the Presidency. Rudi is the head of the Project Management Office in the Private Office of the President. He is responsible for supporting the implementation of the Presidential Jobs Summit Framework Agreement, the President's Youth Employment Initiative, as well as unblocking regulatory challenges that impact on employment and the economic growth. Rudi's insights will be very useful in considering youth transitions into the labor market and help us to consider priority areas for research. So once again, a really, really warm welcome to all of you and Mr. Rudi Dicks as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. Parimal. We really appreciate those kind words. Before I move on to introducing our wonderful panel this morning, I also want to just acknowledge what an exciting turnout of people we have in the room today. We have people who are our past and present master's students in the room. We have our PhD students in the room. We have colleagues from the Wits School of Education. We have colleagues from schools of education in other universities. We have researchers. We have colleagues from development agencies and donor agencies. We have colleagues from government and government departments, and of course from the CETAs, who we work very closely with, and others that I will probably forget. But I think it's a really interesting group here today. For me, it's really exciting that we are actually meeting in real life and not in that very weird, distanced online format that we've all become accustomed to over the past few years. So I really hope that it's an opportunity for people who come from really diverse areas, but who are all concerned with skills, education, training, the economy, social development, to be able to engage. And I hope it presents an opportunity in which you can chat and talk to people that you don't actually normally meet up with. It was nice seeing people having coffee earlier and having a chance to just catch up in real life as opposed to virtually. And I hope that the rest of the 2 days also continues to offer you all that opportunity. We are really happy to have such an interesting and diverse group of people here, and we really look forward to hearing from the panelists, but also hearing questions, comments, contributions from the audience in the formal sessions and during the informal sessions as well. So welcome again to all of you. I'm now going to move on to introducing our first speaker here today, but before I do that, I just have to point out that you're going to see this morning all the people who've ever been directors of the Real Centre. There's 3 of us, and I'm happy to say all women, which is important while we're celebrating Women's Month in South Africa. I was the second director of the Real Centre, and happy not to be that anymore. I'm very glad that Presha is now the director. The very first director, the founding director, maybe we can call her the mother of the Real Centre, is Professor Peliwe Lolwana. As Prof. Parimal mentioned, she's a retired academic and retired government person who is still very unretired and very active in all sorts of ways. Peliwe, as you already heard, founded this centre. She has founded and launched a number of educational and government institutions. She's currently director of the SAQA board. Prior to that, she was the director of the board of the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations. She sits on many other boards. She's been a senior advising consultant with the Youth Employment Services. She's a member of the South African BRICS think tank. She chairs commissions for government and industry. She participates in commissions and think tanks. She writes on youth unemployment, skills development, informality, adult education, ICTs in skills development, inequality, post-school education. When we asked Peliwe for her biography, her description of herself is that she's a pedestrian academic or an academic activist rather than a decadent researcher. So I'll leave you to make of that what you will, but I will say that from our side, Peliwe is an incredibly valuable person, an incredibly valuable academic researcher, and also an incredibly valuable academic activist. And we really hope that she is happy with how we have taken forward the baby that she started. And we're really, really happy to have Peliwe here today to reflect on the founding of the Real Centre and the journey towards the creation of the Real Centre.
Thank you very much, Marceline. I haven't done this in a long, long time of standing in front of people. I was just saying to people, I wish we could have elements of COVID with us when we can see all on your screens. You are going to hear from me a very non-academic speech. I was given a leeway. I didn't want to ask them a lot, what do you want me to say? Because they probably will want me to go and consult a book. I don't read many academic or textbooks anymore. I read fiction. So I'm going to tell you a very small story about the genesis of this center. And unfortunately, that story will revolve around what was going on in my own head and in my own life up to that point. It doesn't mean, therefore, that I've cut out all the people who have been associated with this organization. Oh, is it the side one? Or they tried to do? Okay. It has been a personal journey, as I was saying. At some point in my life, I was appointed at an organization called South African Certification Council, SACET. And the brief was that it must be a body that is going to certify everybody equally, because we are coming from that era of many departments of education and uphold the standards of the matric examination, which is a body that birthed Umalusi to move away from this SACET. I did that job for almost 8 years, which is the longest job I've ever done in my life. I did it because it had a whole lot of things to handle for a long time. One of them was to come up with a new body and figure out what it needs to do that is different. And remember, in 1996, the pass rate for black people in matric was only 46%. The whole pass rate, and those with exemption, was 6%. So it was coming from a low base. We had to work with the provincial departments and try to ensure that this could change and there could be different interventions that we put in the system. The more we did that, the more students came up, the schools were able to perform. It was not only the government, but different institutions, including those who were training teachers. So there was a lot of change that was happening between 1996 up to maybe 2000 and something. During that time, people were complaining, how is it that the results could be so high? How did they get all of this, especially black people? So there was a whole lot of tussle of not believing that these were good results, and we had to defend and defend whether or not how we do certify the standard of matric. Up to a point where the we were able to bring in many people who believed that definitely the standard of education in the school education is improving. As we did that, there was always, and is always, the remnants of that is still happening, this big hullabaloo in December of coming out of results. And personally, that was the time that I hated the most about my job, because it was a time where there's a lull between the accidents in the roads of the people who are traveling to KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape and the matric exams in terms of news. So there would be a big thing about this pass rate that is not believable, or that is what. And it was at that time exactly where I would figure out I was becoming sadder and sadder in my soul, because primarily I knew how many people were not getting to that metric, how many people were failing, how many people were passing but were not passing well enough to be able to go through to do something meaningful. How many people were passing matric well enough and still would not be able to proceed. I knew the problems that we were celebrating, but in the context of South Africa, even then, it meant not very much. This became a depressing element of my thinking every year that this was happening. So I agonized about these students because nobody was talking about them, nobody. And our job at Umalusi was just to certify the results and make sure that of good standard. In 2007, I went on sabbatical from Umalusi, and my aim was to go to try and go and think about this. What is it that we could do? I was in the USA for most of 2007, and I realized, because I was in the Commission of Higher Education in this country, and I've always known when we compare countries that the USA has got the highest numbers of postgraduate students in the world. And I've always assumed that everybody, just from birth, they just go up to postgraduate studies. But I realized that, first of all, there are so many people in the USA who don't ever finish high school. But the system allows them for different routes of second chance. And I realized that we only have got this one route that goes to higher education, and everybody wants to go to higher education. I've learned something there about how a system can be flexible, but I knew that South Africa was not USA. One thing that happened, I lost interest with the obsession of metric at that time. Something had to be done. The first thing that I did was to consult with the Minister of Education, who was Minister Pando at that time, to say, I can't do this anymore. There's a bigger problem outside of the system than in the system that we're not paying attention to. And her response was that, you've got the same interest as me. Please don't resign at Umalusi yet until you can find somebody else who can come and take over. But I will allow you to work on this problem. I will establish a minister of one person, a ministerial committee of one person. You will be in that committee. And you can come and go and solve this problem. So with a lot of energy, thinking that now this is my turn to think and do this, I went and tried to do some research. At that time, there was a whole thing, one of the things that had happened in our education system with the introduction of outcomes-based education was the reduction of offerings, subjects in the school system. There was more than 300 subjects that were offered in the schooling system. Some of the things were not making sense, but they had a place. Kids were taking courses in butchery. Kids were taking courses in making funeral caskets. the belts and so on, but also the courses were taken at 4 different levels: the lower level, the functional level, the standard, the higher grade. So you'd find that many students were able to find whatever they could be able to master. So I went and spent a year in 2008 trying to manage Malusi remotely, but also doing some research. And the result of that was the report that you can find in the department's publication, After School, So What? Opening wider and more flexible learning ways. But something had to be done. What that period taught me was how scant the research was in the country about doing the transition. And I realized that there is no way that anybody can jump and say, we're going to do A, B, and C, because there was no knowledge base on which we're going to build this. At the same time, we were talking about a different era when there was a high economic growth, but the employment was low. Started to think about the work that we did at the Department of Labor, and in particular in Lela, around the training that was provided for everybody in the country, almost everybody, the training of the unemployed, which was vast and huge. I also knew that the government at that moment was limited in terms of its capacity to be able to do something. Because some of us who were there at the beginning in 1994, when the new government took over, that it was supported by a whole range of academics to be able to put its policies together. I was in NEPI, so there was that impetus of different kinds of academics, consultants, and researchers who came together to get the government started in doing something. From that experience, I realized that there's no way that you can start a new venture without, first of all, building a new knowledge. But the country itself was obsessed with different things of how wrong OBE was. That is what the schools of education were obsessed with. The higher education, the reshaping of higher education landscape in order not to make to do away with black, colored, Indian, and white universities. The technical colleges were thinking about how they're going to amalgamate those colleges. And in the Department of Labor, the establishment of the new skills development framework and doing away with many things, including the training of the unemployed. So it was in that context that in 2009 I arrived at Wits, thinking that this should be a starting point of building a new platform of knowledge with very little resources, very scant, and I couldn't find any resources at Wits. But warm people with smiles, everybody was smiling and had no clue of what I was talking about. They were training their teachers to be. So it was a little bit lonely, but a little bit, and also scary, not knowing what to do. Appointed as a director of the Education Policy Unit, which was almost becoming defunct because of its financial situation. And yet, this was a policy unit that had made its mark in terms of supporting government and coming with policies that were extremely helpful to the present government. So I had to start long conversations. Remember at that time, we didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't have, the network was not as good, we didn't have social media, we didn't have Teams and so on. But I had to talk a lot with Stephanie, who was in Edinburgh, to figure out how do we start to craft this agenda, with the idea that when he comes back from doing a postdoctoral, we're going to be able to start this center. And Stephanie and I zoom into this agenda from different perspectives. She's worked quite a lot on the curriculum, the knowledge side, and more than it was necessary on the NQF. On the NQF. On one thing that I had said when it comes, are you not going to stop now working on the NQF? Please. I come from people's side of looking how can we help people in order to live a meaningful and a better life. But we have worked together from Umalusi time, so we were able to find each other and craft an agenda and ways of trying to get this center up and running. We also was confronted by the bureaucracy of Wits University. Oh my God, I thought government was bureaucratic, but Wits University, it takes a head, the icing from me. You cannot have a center, you cannot have an institute, you cannot have this. And I kept on saying, I just want something. I want a space, I want my own space. Tell me what. It took those 3 years to be able to get to establish the real center. But Minister Blake Zimande, who succeeded the Minister Pando, was extremely helpful as well. He supported the center. He also is the one who had supported the building of this infrastructure. You have got to give those compliments to him. Then Real started attracting a number of students and researchers. The number of people, we have got Professor Volker Vereken here, we had Dr. Andre Krak, we had a number of people who really liked to be associated with this. As the agenda of the center was becoming fine-tuned, we found that we are having a number of people who have got similar interests. These are the areas in which some of the research was taking place in the early years. And I think some of them are continuing, but we have got to know that every knowledge building entity has got to move on and become relevant and do whatever it needs to do because of what is really going to make sense. Lastly, for me, I have got 3.5. I didn't want to write the last one, but because the head of school is here, I would want to say it. The education, skills, and self-employment really has got to think about it because it's not quite true that we're going to find jobs for everybody. We also must be able to think about how skills can enhance community development. We have to think about those communities that are poorly underserved, that are very underdeveloped, and see how this work could be able to link with them. You have to think about the education and skills in the digital economy. But I want to say to the School of Education, Real has proved itself. It has taken strides beyond my own imagination when I started here. I had no idea where it was going to go, and I'm very grateful for the people who have taken this and taken it so much forward, more than I would have been capable of, and it is a center that it is. But the School of Education cannot sit on the side. Real cannot sit outside of the School of Education. We can't continue to take education as only being teacher education. Education is confronted by so many problems and so much is expected of what education should do in our society. I would like to think that the School of Education can start thinking about what this center means for the school instead of being a center that is outside, that has to find its own resources, and it has got to be just shown when people like this happen. It has got to be at the center of thinking about how we make the contribution of education meaningful to the citizens of this country. It has got a lot to offer that would be useful when the center is very central to the meaning of education in this. You have to figure out what would it mean in terms of locating it, in terms of resourcing it, in terms of relating it to many other things that are happening. We can't think about a singular function of education being teacher education. Thank you very much for your listening and your patience.
Thanks, Peliwe, and I'm happy to say that our last panel tomorrow afternoon is looking at exactly this issue, and we have leaders of schools of education, faculties of education, who will be reflecting precisely on the role of schools of education in looking at education beyond schooling. I think you can all see, Peliwe is someone who has shaped so many parts of our education and training system in South Africa, and she continues to do so in a whole range of places. And I think that, the contribution of setting up this center was really a wonderful part of her many contributions to our system. And we are looking forward to continuing to work with her. As she mentioned, actually, she's also been very influential person in my career personally. She recruited me to work for her at Umalusi, where I ran the research unit. Previously, I'd been working in an NGO. And as she said, I then went abroad for a few years, and she said, no, you have to come back. We're starting this thing. You have to come work here. And I've been here ever since. So thanks, Peliwe. And I left my notes. So as I said, I was the second director after Peliwe left. And I'm now going to introduce to you the current director, who I'm sure most of you have met. And if you haven't met, do take some time to chat with her over coffee. She's a powerhouse in her own right, Dr. Presha Ramsarup. She's a senior research associate at the Environmental Learning Research Center at Rhodes University, and responsible for a very strong collaboration that we have with Rhodes University in that regard. And we'll be talking about some of the research that has come from that very important partnership over the 2 days. And an honorary associate professor at the University of Nottingham. Her research work focuses on learning pathways for sustainable development and sustainability within vocational education. She's currently working on a range of research programs focused on sustainability and education and training in South Africa and in Africa. She's served as an environmental education technical advisor to both provincial and national government departments in South Africa. She's the current president of the Environmental Education Association of South Africa. And quite often she says to me, please, can I just stop managing things and get some time to do some research? But somehow she does actually manage to produce an amazing amount of research, and we will be sharing some of that with you at our book celebration this evening, at the same time as supervising students and teaching on a master's program. So she brings an enormous amount of energy and direction to the center. We're very privileged to have her as the director, and I'm going to hand over to her to tell you about our current and future work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Steph, for that introduction. And thank you so much, Peliwe. You just reminded me that I'm definitely at the right place. Because everything that you spoke about are still such important issues to me. You may not know, but my own PhD was about learning pathways into jobs that don't exist, okay, and trying to understand pathways that are not clear. So listening to you again actually brought all of that back, and that not the agony of the PhD journey, but the passion of trying to understand pathways that don't exist. So Peliwe has told us a little bit about our history. She didn't tell you about how she started off in this very dingy office in Wozani Block. But really, I want to pay credit to Peliwe, this wonderful resource where you are today, as largely to Peliwe's work and leadership that helped to fundraise with the multiple people within DHET to reshape this particular building, together with our colleagues from the Deaf Center, to house the new Real Center. But with that, I also want to acknowledge Peliwe's leadership, and you heard all the maneuvering that she had to do. Her intellectual leadership in starting the center is really crucial, has been really crucial, Peliwe. And I hope you're really happy to see where the center has gone and how the center is developing, and the different streams of work that are starting to emerge from the center. When I listen to a group of our students together, I always get so amazed at the variety of work that's actually happening at the moment, which is a good reason for you to come back to a seminar or PhD seminar at the center again. So in my presentation, I'm going to start by introducing you to the real team. These are all the people, you probably have seen them around, and I want to pay tribute to every one of them, like Stephanie has done. Our new doctor in the house, just wave, Dr. Malabatsi. We've had two new doctors. Where is the next one? Dr. Ndaba. You can see the real team in action. Dr. Ndaba, two new doctoral people achieving their PhDs in the last 2 months. So, and one result which we're hoping we're going to get very soon is another result. So we're hoping for a bumper start to this particular year. But this is the real team. As you can see, a vibrant and diverse community of scholars, passionate individuals, passionate about different areas of educational research, and passionate about making a difference in South Africa as well as the African continent. Many of them will speak very passionately about Africa's future and their commitment to being part of growing Africa's future. So I really want to introduce them all to you, and to just say some of their student posters, though, they've managed to get it ready at the back of this room. But when you get a chance, and Steph will explain it to you later, to please see some of their work, their posters downstairs, illustrating some of their research as well. Just to give you, our intellectual network has also grown. We have participated in a wide range of cutting-edge international and local, sorry, I seem to have done something to this PowerPoint. Our intellectual network has grown. We're involved in a number, these are our current university partners.
The previous one.
Yeah. It's on I managed somehow to put it on some kind of automatic thing. I'm not sure exactly how I did that, but I apparently did, according to the tech guru here, who's also a real student. Okay, but anyway, if you go back, you just hold it down. I'm sure it will. So, okay. All right, it doesn't matter. But you can see some of the universities that we're engaged in, many on the African continent, as well as international collaborations. Shout out to Professor Weerkant from the University of Nottingham, who's joined us here today, but lots of other international collaborations, as well as different people. These are our current partners. There have been others from previous research projects, as well as other African universities. Okay. We're also been involved in doing research and working with a number of partner organizations, and the center in the past 2 years have been engaged with a number of international donor funders, research, as you can see. So we see ourselves as a center that is aimed at contributing to a body of research on education and development, as well as providing insights for policymakers to help solve some of the developing world's greatest challenges. Two that we focus on largely in our work is youth unemployment and the urgent need for a just transition. Both these challenges are really urgent to Africa, as well as South Africa in particular, and hence they have emerged as central to our work. Africa, as we all know, faces a youth unemployment crisis. I was at AU meeting the other day, and the youth convener there made the comment that we're looking at about 73% of the world's youth. That's the under 35, which was very interesting. Africa faces a youth unemployment crisis as well as a broader socioeconomic as well as a socio-ecological crisis. We know that sub-Saharan Africa has got a water scarcity greater than anywhere else in the world. 1 in 3 people in South Africa are facing a water crisis. So any educational agenda in Africa needs to consider the fact that 1 in 3 people struggle to have access to water. Okay? As researchers who examine the relationship between education and work, these kind of issues and the interrelationships and the connections between these issues is central to how we look at the changing nature of work. So if we look at the issue of youth unemployment again, that I raise, typically youth unemployment is seen to be solved through skills and educational interventions. There are a number of skills and donor interventions focused around youth employment. Research in this center has showed that an oversimplified view and a plethora of interventions based on just this idea that education will solve the unemployment crisis is flawed. And Stephanie will be talking extensively about that in the panel this afternoon. Okay? Our work has actually tried to focus on, our work has tried to focus on ideas, and what is emerging is that skill formation, including all education and training and skills development in preparation for work, should not be treated. That skills development is not separate and a standalone element of an education and training system. It needs to be an integral part of the country's social and economic institutions. And it needs to be an integral part of how a country plans, both in terms of its industrialization trajectories, its understanding of social and economic policies, broader socioeconomic and cultural factors. All of this needs to be recognized when we think about how we look at a skill formation system. And that has been central to the work of REAL, not to treat skills development as an add-on to technological or industrial processes. As an environmental researcher, we're very used to that. We're looking at the energy transition, we change the technology, and then we think about what skills do we need to implement the technology. Okay? And what we end up with is a shopping list of skills that we give to education providers to say, and Stephanie loves that kind of research. we end up with a shopping list of skills and say, these are the skills needs for the energy transition. This is the list of the skills needs to enable the transition to whatever. So in our work, we look much more broadly at how skills development processes is part of and integral to social, economic, and ecological development, and is integral to planning and implementation within those processes. So we're interested in things like the levers of change that will improve regional skills formation systems or skills ecosystems. We've just been involved we have 2 separate projects that's looking at local skills ecosystems and how they work and what it means in terms of developing local economies and economies for the common good. And Stephanie also, and I'm sure she'll make it this afternoon, if we don't start to look at these various aspects, policymakers, including national policymakers, as well as development agencies that are active in the developing world, are making policy in the dark. It's not giving us, we're not getting to the root of what these issues are. So, within the center, our work has been drawing on a wide range of issues that we grouped in two ways: skills, formation systems for social and economic development and ecological well-being, and learning and work transitioning in difficult and complex times. And many of the issues that I've been speaking about run integral to both these key areas, and you will see it emerging in all of the work that you see at the bottom. And across all of this, okay, and across all of this is our idea and our belief that the starting point is to see skills as located within the economy, okay, and not as separate from the economy. So the economic programs that we're involved in, the technological programs that are involved in, skills development needs to be integral within the planning of those programs, not an add-on at the end of those programs. And what we believe this requires is a strong analysis of knowledge. Is a strong analysis of knowledge, curriculum, and working with ideas that we draw. And you can see our very chaotic or very dynamic, not chaotic, our very dynamic our very dynamic illustration of some of the theoretical ideas that we're working with around our center, drawing from schools of thoughts around from political economy, political ecology, industrialization, sustainability, transitions, labor markets and societies, as well as economies for the common good. And importantly, we see how all these things relate and help us to understand complexity in different ways. So some of the things that I think that is worth noting that we've achieved in the last few years: we have a strong trajectory of of young researchers in a new research field. Okay, we have a strong trajectory of young researchers. In 2015, we launched our master's program. It has been an extremely successful master's program. It is one of, in the School of Education, it is regarded as one of the most subscribed master's programs in the school. There's a lot of interest in it. It draws a wide range of students. It is a master's that's focusing, and I think there are brochures for the masters outside. Am I right, guys? Yes, okay. So if you're interested, it looks at relationships between education and work. Almost everybody that does our master's program already has a master's. and that's actually true. Most of them already have master's degrees. But they come to it because they come from such different disciplines. So that's the other thing. It draws people from different disciplines into the School of Education. And they want to study the complex relationship between education and the labor market, or education and work. Okay? We have a strong PhD cohort. We have around 18 PhD students, many of them South African, the bulk of them actually, South African PhD students. I think we only had 2 PhD students that were not South African. We have a strong cohort of postdoctoral fellows. You will meet one of our postdoctoral fellows on a panel tomorrow, and who will be sharing some of the work that we've done. We have an outstanding publication record among, rating very highly within the school. We have managed, as you will see in the book celebration this afternoon, by the end of this year, we would have produced in the 10 years 5 books, as well as a long list of journal articles as well as reports. We were also extremely proud in 2017 when Professor Alays got the NRF Saatchi Chair in Skills Development, and we're very proud of the fact that the center houses a chair for skills development. So it's really seen as a center of excellence with regard to skills development in this country at multiple levels. The gathering of people that are here today is an illustration at the level of which the center is regarded within the skills community in this country. Just a picture to show 4 of the books that you will hear about later this afternoon, just to remind you to stay for the book celebration as well. And as you can see, it's books on a wide, that actually draws on a wide range of the work that is actually happening at the center. Another thing that's outstanding about the center is the work that we do, which is at the interface between policy and research. A lot of our research, and I think we do solid, good quality research. And many, the work of our students and our publication record, you can pick and follow some of that. But we've also managed to share the research into multiple policy platforms. We collaborate and participate in multiple policy processes in different areas. As you can see, there are three important things. In 2021, we were involved in the skills dialogue briefs, which we worked together with the range with GTAC, CBPEP, and the Department of Higher Education, as well as other, and we did a high-level government consultation around skills issues in the country, and there are a set of skills dialogue briefs from those consultations. So there are 5 skills dialogue briefs, okay, that actually look at that work, and that drew on a lot of the work. It was led by Real, conceptualized and planned and led by the center. Stephanie led it. It consulted almost all the major skills stakeholders at a national level in the country. And it's actually a really good collection, so please make sure that you manage to take away your copy. At the bottom is the skills strategy that we worked with and led to support the economic recovery, the President's economic recovery plan, which was the post-COVID skills strategy. And on the last side is the enabling. So you will hear tomorrow and later this afternoon about the work that we've been doing around green skills and supporting skills for a just transition. And what we did, you will see the academic book this afternoon, but we also developed a set of tools that SETAs and government officials could actually use to analyze green skills and skills for a just transition in their sectors. So inside that book, and it's inside that source book, which is copyright free and it's available on the internet, the Department of Environmental Affairs, and I think they are here. You wave to us. They're here. Oh, there they are. Thomas and Pandalani, also Real alumni, head of school, who are the head of skills development in the Department of Environmental Affairs, Forestries and Fisheries. I got that right. They actually took the research work that we were doing in the research program and when we developed the source book to support SETAs and people involved in skills, we were happy to make it available for anyone doing skills work that wanted tools. And the Department of Environmental Affairs kindly printed the copies that you will, and they've been utilizing it to do workshops together with SETAs and other entities around the country. Okay, so we've made considerable contributions to lift from our research and actually feed and connect to other processes that are important in the country and that are going on in the country. And I think that's why this is such a special research center. And as Peliwe would say, I don't think we're decadent researchers. We do good research. We do good research. And I really believe in the research we do, but I can give you 20 examples of how our research has been picked up and is actually being used in policy processes in this country. Okay, it's just more examples of how it's being used. Our work on occupations and qualifications have been used widely in this country, both with SETAs as well as with the QCTO. And Vijen, the CEO of the QCTO, is here with us today. And we've also been doing some of that research together and feeding it into the work on occupations together with them, our work on skills and migration together with the ILO, as well as UNESCO looking at skills for supporting the transitioning of TVET in Africa. So we did a large study for UNESCO, picking up from our research, actually looking at TVET across Africa, including the Portuguese and the French, which was a very interesting experience for us, trying to collect data from all these multiple different countries. Okay, so I think I've told you a lot about the work that we're doing, and hopefully you feel excited to connect with us and to draw from some of the work that's going on in the center. Just to say that a lot of it is available downstairs in exhibition in terms of research posters, and we're all available to chat. I want to talk quickly, before Stephanie shuts me up, about where we think we're going to, okay? And I know Peliwe has already put out some ideas, and you will see downstairs we also have a tree. We asked friends of Real, people that are involved with the center, to send us a message on where they see the center by 2032, in the next 10 years, how they look at the center, or what they see the center doing in the next 10 years. And many of those messages, I'm not going to read a lot of them now, but many of those messages you will see displayed downstairs on this tree. But we're also inviting you, all of you, because we know you come from different sectors, to leave a message for us of what you would like, research you'd like to see emerge from Real in the next 10 years. So leave a message on our tree. I don't know what it's called. They did tell me a name, and now I've forgotten it. And one of these youngsters are going to be angry with me. But there is a tree downstairs with all the messages, so please leave. So one of the areas that we are looking at is, and looking at really expanding our work over the next 10 years, is linked to the Saatchi Chair and the work that the Saatchi Chair is actually doing. And that key area is engaging with researchers focused on the ways in which industrialization trajectories can create a more sustainable and just future, and how skills formation interacts with these trajectories. This includes an analysis of whether or not the education system is actually changing and responding to meeting the challenges of the changes in different aspects in society. So that's one part of the work that we've got targeted. How technology and the environmental crisis are changing the world of work, and how Africa and the developing world can ensure just transition in the face of these changes. How is the world of work changes? How do we are involved in a project in the Eastern Cape, and you'll hear a little bit about it downstairs later this afternoon, where we think about how do we farm where there's no water? That's what we mean, where Africa has unique challenges and constraints that makes us think about the world of work, okay? Think about how we change and think about knowledge required in the world of work. No agricultural curriculum anticipated teaching farming with no water, okay? So you will hear about a case study this afternoon about working with local farmers in an area that's water scarce. How skills planning and education can be embedded, how skills planning and education can be embedded into economic planning. I think I've spoken about that. And what all of this can mean for circular and regenerative economies. And not just because I saw Henry here earlier on. Henry, are you still here? who leads the circular economy group. And what does this mean? And when we start to think about circular and regenerative economies, what does that mean for knowledge, curriculum, and forms of work? We had a big discussion with our master students last week with Yael. I mean, how do we think about knowledge and learning when we think about informal work? How do we think about learning when we're looking at the practice of waste pickers on a waste dump who are learning to sort plastic and learning the meaning of the symbols on plastic? So there are multiple questions that's starting to emerge that we want to pick up. the knowledge and skills required to access labor markets and as new forms of work are developed through a complex mix of both formal, on-the-job training, learning through experience. All of these are important, and all of these, and the interrelationships between these forms of learning are critical. So all of that and the aspects around it are things that we would really like to focus on in the next 10 years. So I'll end by saying that I really do believe that REAL is unique. And I think that the work that we do is unique. And I think that it's unique internationally because our focus on how we work with and understand the relationship between education and work as part of a broader ecosystem, okay, and not as a singular thing. And as part of not just a local ecosystem, but a country's social, ecological, and economic development trajectory, okay? And it's also unique, I believe, in ways where we work very iteratively with policy, research, and postgraduate training. So, and I think that's been the strength of our center. We've got solid postgraduate students, solid research program, and we work strongly with policy. And that kind of interrelationship, I think, has really helped us to build a unique center. So I'm going to stop here and say thank you very much. Sorry about my jumping PowerPoint.
Thank you, Presha. You can see she has a lot of energy. She has to keep this thing afloat, to keep this ship afloat. Presha spoke about a lot about our policy work, and I think Peliwe also mentioned that we had support from the Minister of Higher Education, the then Minister of Higher Education, now Minister of Education, Science and Technology, in raising funds for this building. And we are really happy that tomorrow we're going to have both the Minister of Employment and Labour and the Minister of Education, Science and Technology opening our two panels tomorrow, because I think it really does capture both the interface with the policy world and also the fact that we're looking at the world of work and the world of education and trying to find ways of bringing them together. On that note, I think Prof. Perumal has already introduced Rudi. Rudi is an old friend, but also an incredibly busy person who spends most of his time in the presidency, working with cabinet and working with industrial leaders and international players. And we are really, really happy that he could take time out of that schedule to be with us today. It's so important for us because the work that the presidency is spearheading through the project management office in youth unemployment, in work for the common good, in creating work opportunities and learning opportunities is such an important part of how we are conceptualizing the role of education and training in South Africa. And that's why we are really, really happy to have Rudi here today. So over to you, Rudi.
So when I moved to Johannesburg I think it was late '96, I found Steph at a block of flats in Yeovil. In Yeovil. Bellevue in particular. Yeovil was distinct between Bellevue and Yeovil, but we were just like a couple of meters away from Rocky Street. And the two of us lived in the only blue block of flats in Yeovil. I think it's still blue.
Yeah.
Yep. And our landlord was an old Bulgarian guy, if I remember him, right? With a very deep Eastern European accent. So Steph and I know each other for some time, from the union days also. And thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Prof, for allowing me to come through here. And just one other personal note, I have two people over here that has been indelible in where I am today, right? And it's very rare because I met both of them when I was 13 years old. This is when my political life had started, right? And to have two of them in the same room is very, very rare. So I have to acknowledge them, right? Sishle Moon, Dr. Sishle Moon, who I had met when I was still a young student in standard 6, 7. That young, yes. Not great, standard 6, 7. And he was the chairperson then of the Western Cape Student Congress, WEXCO, which was an offspring of COSAS that was banned then. And another young person also, of course I was more younger than her then, and still am younger than her right now, is Carmel Marok. Carmel was, again, another important person in my life because she used to work with Sishle and them, and Mari specifically, and this was to be the old ERIC that became ERP, Education Resource and Information Project or Center, in developing young political leaders in, representing young students at the Student Representative Council, WEXCO branches, and a whole lot of different structures that were there. So I just wanted to recognize the two of them. But anyway. So thanks. I am responsible for quite a few things. And it's a bit crazy, but I mean, this is one of the more interesting stuff that we're involved in, right? So all the other stuff are boring, right? But we run this project management office, and I think the ability for us to be able to set up a project management office in the private office of the president has helped us to be able to be a bit more agile and responsive in the crisis that besets us as government. And the crisis that generally besets us, as you quite well know, is that we do very well at policy. We do very well at partnering with organizations like REAL in doing research, but we do really poor at implementation. And so we have all these issues that have been designed, but we are unable to implement them quite effectively. And so what the president has asked is, can you set up a project management office to be able to implement some of the more pertinent things that he wants to focus on? And one of those particular areas, as you can see, it's these areas, but I'm going to focus on middle block, which is the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, because I think that is where it matters over here in the conversation that we want to have with REAL today. But there are others also, which is the setting up of the Presidential Employment Stimulus, and you would, many of you would probably be familiar with them. How many? 6,000 graduates that are supported, right, at universities. About 300,000 young people at basic educations, at schools, 22,000 schools across the country, for example. And so we're doing the employment stimulus with Dr. Kate Phillip. I also work on the Operation Vulindlela, which is the structural reform program. Many of you may have heard about it. It's some of the more interventions to be able to get economic growth. But let's focus on the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, and this is the critical area that I wanted to talk about, right? So what we have been doing is working with departments, because it's important to distinguish the role of the presidency versus implementing departments. And always at great pains to explain that the presidency is not an implementing department. It is a coordinating structure. It has the center of government in a sense. So it has an ability, it has a bit of power to be able to nudge, work with, and partner with a number of departments to get speed, agility, and the ability to be able to deliver on a number of interventions. And that's really the crux. And in the presentation, I'm hoping that comes through so you understand exactly the kind of role we play and the interface that we have with departments in delivering on key programs that are there. But before I just move on to this slide, the one point that I forgot to mention earlier on was that I'm also happy to be here, Steph, because it's always a challenge to try and develop a intersection between research, policy, and implementation, right? And I call that an intersection partly because the one thing that we've learned as I continue to work with Carmel and many other colleagues is that we sometimes, in the union movement, we used to say we used to die with our boots on a position, right? So we take a position and no matter what, right, we die with our boots and we'll defend that. But in life, it doesn't always work that way. So life is about iterations, isn't it, right? It's about research, it's about cascading that into policy, it's about implementing. If it fails, we go back to the drawing board. And sometimes, when we sit on ideas or what we do as researchers or policy, we sit on that and we want to go into that direction, despite the failure. What do they say? They normally say that, no matter how many times you train to do that, it's not going to change, right? I forgot the exact saying right now. And so intersection is quite important because the way we've designed our intervention is to say we've done something, it doesn't work, we go back, right? We've designed an intervention and we take another pathway, right? Or we take a different pathway from what we have done. So what we've done is an iteration over the last 2.5 years to be able to get to something which we think is what we hope is a useful implementation to support young people. Now, it's not an overarching, a detailed implementation plan. What it is about, and it's very specific, in getting young people, and we say this, young people from learning to earning. And many of you have probably heard this saying, but that is quite critical for us. And when we define earning, we don't define it as a job, right? We don't define it in the traditional sense of formal employment. Earning, in a sense, means very different things to young people. I always use my older son as an example. And sorry for those who have heard this story before. But young people tend to zigzag, right? I mean, today young people tend to zigzag. Presha, you and I are happy to have permanent jobs. My son, who is 24 years old, he is delivering bread one day, and then he's working in a retail store the next month, and then he's getting a stint to do a bit of ramp modeling, and then he's back at university, and then he drops out of university and goes to college again, right? So they zigzag in and out trying to find forms of income and resources. And that's the nature of how our society has developed. And so how do we develop systems that are agile enough to be able to support those kind of young people that have those kind of opportunity? Or where they don't have those opportunities, we create those opportunities for them. Because that's the nature of how we see society and how we interact with young people. So we have done these 5 interventions specifically that we think could help young people to shift from learning to earning. So at the center of this is 4 particular components and 5 sectors of intervention. And let's talk about those sectors at a later stage, Steph, because I think those are important for how we develop that intersection between policy, research, and implementation to support the growth of particular sectors and the work that we're doing on it. So central to the presidential employment youth employment intervention efforts is the establishment of a national pathway management network. And many of you have heard this before, and I'm going to spend a bit of time to explain it because Rene here also has been saying, I don't quite know how to explain this pathway management network. And I think it's quite an important area of work that we have established and why we think it's so central to be able to give access to young people. The second area is that, we're specifically looking at areas of demand-led skills training. And it's a pay-per-performance model. And I want to explain a little bit because we think this is unique. This is something that we think is an opportunity that we are able to build on in the way that we see skills training from a different perspective. Instead of the traditional form of supply models of skills where we churn out the skills and hope for young people to find employment, we want to test and we've been doing this around a demand skills approach, and I'll explain that. The third area is just enabling local ecosystems to facilitate self-employment and enterprise development, because again, it's not just about formal employment or informal employment, it's also in various forms of economic activity that is out there. Revitalization of the National Youth Service, and that's quite important because we do have a National Youth Service program, but we're looking at revitalizing that. And then, lastly, a number of interventions on priority growth areas with employment potential for young people. So this is the 4 areas. Now, it doesn't touch on basic education. It doesn't touch on a number of other things, social ills. it looks, as I say, specifically around how we get young people from learning to earning, and what are the kind of opportunities that we create for the kind of young person for today, so that they can get into an earning opportunity, and not mold them to what we think the kind of earning opportunity is. And that's the trick, right? Because it's quite difficult in trying to deal with many, many young people out there, and particularly those who are looking for different forms of opportunity, either in education, moving out of education. As I said, that zigzagging is always there, right? And where we fit into the system to catch young people is important in the way that we design this particular intervention. The second most important part about this is that, like you have, Presha spoke about, when I took up this particular role, I had said to colleagues, the way this thing works is that, many of us in government are quite shy, if I say it quite nicely, quite shy, in developing partnerships outside of government. When we talk about partnerships in government, I was horrified to find it when I joined, when I left COSATU in 2013. When they talk about partnerships, they talk about a partnership with Department of Employment of Labor, a partnership with, I said, but that's not partnership, that's government. You're all in government, man, So developing true and genuine partnerships is a center and pillar of our ability to be able to have a successful program. And you'll see some of the performance outcomes that I'll show later on around them. So we've been able to develop quite a significant partnership within government, with institutions outside of government, with industries, with various skills bodies. Steph, I want to solidify our partnership because that's important for us, right? So we have been partnering with you and the center for a bit of time on a number of projects. I think let's try and solidify that. I think there's a real opportunity for us to be able to ensure that we have that intersection of research, policy, and implementation, and REAL can play quite a central role in the way that you've done it already on some of the master plan processes under the ERRP. So partnership is central to our approach. We provide overall coordination and political leadership, and that's quite nice because the youth intervention is a program that the president had asked us to develop, and so there's the highest form of political buy-in, and that's very rare to get, right? Because generally sometimes the politicians, I'm not speaking bad about my president, sometimes politicians in the history that I know, they throw you to the side, you on your own, right? But in this instance, the president has made this, and in every single State of the Nation address, and where he addresses the nation, he makes specific reference to the ability for us to develop interventions for young people. So the PREI has been established to coordinate mechanisms to improve alignment and deliver greater impact with existing resources that are there. So what is the National Pathway Management Network? So the way we've done this, so we set up this, for some of you who are under 36, you can still go and register over here. But if you're over 36, unfortunately, once you punch in your ID number, as I have found out, it kicks you out of the system, right? You will not register. So if you're young enough, if you have kids, ask them to register. There's a bit of means test, of course, because again, if you're a parent and you're earning income above a certain particular threshold, your kids have a better opportunity than many other kids who, for example, do not have. But at the center of the Pathway Management Network is what we refer to is the SA Youth Mobi platform. So you can do that right now. Just type in sayouth.mobi and you'll see that, right? So this is at the center of it. And the aim of the network was to be able to bring together a number of different institutions, organizations, and networks that provide similar support. And really, in a sense, if I put it as crass as this, it's about matching supply and demand. But we're doing much more than that. So I want to distinguish between what normally supply and demand is matching, right? So if you go to Giraffe, for example, right? Very classic, you pay for the services, so that's important. This, you don't pay for the service, right? And basically you register, you provide certain information, and they find a placement for you. Very much classic to a placement agency, employment agency. You also put your services there. You indicate what services you require. you put your CV there, and they also place you. Now, this is very different. Number one, we've zero rated this, right? So all the mobile services have zero rated this. So this is fundamental. Number two, you don't pay for the services. Number three, we've been able to bring together all the different networks that are there. Yes, Harambe that's there, Saldru has been working on it, NBI, UJ, MLab, for example, DSI has been doing a lot of work on this thing. And the process is led by the Department of Employment and Labor as partnership in doing this, right? So the Pathway Management Network is a network of networks. It's a single network that links up and integrates all existing networks in the country that serve young people employed. So we've created this interoperability. You can sign on here and you'll still get through there. You can sign on here and you want to go to yes. So that sophisticated interoperability is very, very important because people prefer, you know, like many young people who, for example, have gone onto the Rambi, or are familiar with the Rambi, wants to sign on by a Rambi, right? Where's a Rambi? There's a Rambi, right? Or many who have interacted with NYDA, they want to sign on by NYDA, but they still get through to that particular platform. So that's important. But the platform beyond that is about stimulating aggregate demand and supply opportunities. So you can obviously have a platform and you can have millions of young people on there. But the success of a platform is when you place young people into opportunities, earning opportunities. Isn't that its measure? And that's fundamental. Because right now we have 2.9 million. It's the largest platform in the country. We have 2.9 million young people who have registered on the platform since it started last year. Right? And if we do not place young people and create the demand and opportunities for that, then I'm afraid people will be frustrated. Young people will say, but I've been on here for a year. I haven't been placed yet. So it's quite important that the ability to be able to get supply and demand matching is going to be quite critical, which means that you can create a platform and you can have hundreds of thousands of young people, but you require the partnership with the demand side, with the back end of the economy to be able to make it work. So Steph, that's the interface that I think we require a lot more research on how we get that demand side working, right? Because there are demand side opportunities. And what are those demand side opportunities? So Presha, I like the point about skills for the future, because we're looking at skills for the future. I mean, let's just take digital and tech skills, for example. We know that there's a shortage of about 70,000 digital tech skills this year, about 500,000 of them over the next 10 years. We kind of like got a sense of where they're going to go into, but we also don't know, you know, so we kind of like looking at digital tech, given its evolution and how quick it moves, it has an ability to be able to ensure that we identify those demands in the future so that when young people register, we know the kind of skill sets they require, whether that's short-term skilling or whether part of a formal education process to be able to get that. So this is the nub, the most important part of being able to understand. Now, when you register here, it doesn't matter where you are in the country. You have a unique reference number, your ID number is your unique reference number. So if you live in KwaMashu and you decide to move to Soweto, you don't have to register and move into an office again and re-register. You are able to update the system and say, I've now moved from KwaMashu in KZN, and I now live in Johannesburg. And this is the most important about this, because you tend to, you know, people tend to spend a lot of money doing job search and being able to access the stuff. And that is why this is also as critical as it is, because young people do spend and do still do traditional forms of job searching, right? If they don't have access to data and Wi-Fi. They print their CV, they borrow money, they jump onto a taxi and they go to an industrial area, or now they comb the city center and go into the office blocks of a retail house or an insurance building or a bank and drop off their CV, hoping for an opportunity. And that kind of job search is quite costly for young people, particularly if you don't have that. And this is the kind of opportunity that we create, where you create a virtual platform of the jobs and opportunity that is there. I thought I'll spend a bit more time explaining that. So just quickly over here, I've explained this already, but as I said here, it's a free access network, you know, to find job opportunities, to earn income and to stay engaged, and that's quite nice. What makes us very different I've emphasized this early on. What makes us very different is because over and above trying to find you an earning opportunity also, it provides and creates opportunities for second chance matric. So many of the young people who register on the system also haven't finished their matric. So it creates that kind of profile for you, an ability for you to be able to get and to complete your matric. And the interaction with young people, it's simply not as cold as sometimes it is, right? You just send your CV through on the system. Because the back end is based on Harambé's network, right? We have ensured that the standards are the same even for 2.9 million young people that have registered. That you come in physically to an interview, right? And that you sit down with a counselor to be able to understand what are the kind of opportunities that you want and where can you be placed. Now, that's physically done, right? To give you a bit of hope, to be able to ensure that you're able to look at what earning opportunities are. And that's fundamental and very, very important. I was engaged a few years ago. I unfortunately don't do it anymore. But many of the young people, for example, who go into jobs and require interviews, we prepare you by assisting you with, mock interviews. Very interesting thing, of course. As you know, I've two younger kids, 19 and 24, and you know the words that they say, gosh, I don't understand half the stuff they say, right? Now, you could either take it as disrespect, or you could take it like, this is just the lingo that we have. Many young people also don't quite know how to address for their first interview. Many young people don't quite know how to interact with their colleagues in workplaces. So part of that preparation of getting them into the first opportunity and job is quite critical in what this platform does. Here we go. Steph, this is the interesting stuff that you've been involved in. So what is this demand-led skills development, right? And the PAY, they said I must say PAY, okay? Contributes to developing an agile workforce through demand-led skills approaches and improved responsiveness of the skilling system. And what this really means is that, when you look at skills development and education, and one looks at this education, the point about it is that you're trying to develop a skilled workforce for the future by developing formal sets of education. But young people can't wait for 2 or 3 years, so what do we do to be able to ensure that the opportunities that are available right now through agile skills training? And I use this as an example because, for example, one of the fastest growing sectors in South Africa is the call center, the BPO sector. Right? It grows at about 27% on average. We've just been, again, allocated the number one spot, again, globally for the best call centers around. So it grows quite exponentially. So in a sense, when I was around, my first job was retail. Retail is still an important part of your first job, but call centers become now an important job. Now, you don't need a formal qualification for a retail job, for a call center job. But you do require training to be able to utilize the equipment. You do require training to be able to answer calls and understand the queries that customers have on the other side of the line. And so, part of this process, you actually require about 13 weeks of training. So you don't get a formal qualification, but you get training that sets you onto a pathway to be able to do that particular job and, of course, get promoted within the system or move out. So demand skills training is about that agility. It's about how we intersect between formal education and skills that are required right now in the workplace. Right? And I know, Steph, you don't sometimes want to hear that, but it's an important part of how we think we can create and get young people as quickly as possible. These interventions are led by the Department of Higher Education, and it's been delivered through the skills strategy, and thanks for the team for developing that, that important document that's there. The established demand-led skills work streams to test a new approach for short-term skills planning has been implemented as well, and we look at that. And part of that demand-led skills training is developing of what we refer to as piloting a pay-for-performance model to unlock employment opportunities for young people with National Skills Fund as the outcome facilitator. So we introduce this new thing around how we can do demand skills. So generally what we do, again, you'll correct me, I'm not an expert in this area, but what we do is that you have allocations from a payroll tax that's given towards seaters, you train people, you hope people get an opportunity, right? So you paid on the basis of how many people you train, but you're not quite sure what the outcome is of the training. So your measurement of the outcome is perhaps wrong. Well, maybe a little bit right, because you want to also train people, right? It's kind of like touch and go. But in this model, we want to pay you on the basis of placement in employment. This is now the tricky part, right? So we pay you to train people on a performance model where the impact is that person, that young person is placed. So if you think about it, I mean, you could have a whole set of theory of changes that is there. What is the social issue? What is the input that you require? Teachers, classroom, infrastructure. The activities to train young person for their job. What is the output? 1,000 young people trained. Right? So let's assume there's an example of that. It's a call center that we set up. You are paid on the outcome. What is the outcome? The outcome is payment on outputs, inputs, and activities. So you've trained 1,000, but you've only placed 600 people. You get paid for 600 people. So this is the model that we're piloting. Very interesting, very technical, very, complex. Getting the industry to understand it, and hopefully we're about to, we're quite close to launching it again, right? No? Yeah, with the National Skills Fund and the Department of Higher Education. And that's an important model for us going forward that we want to test and we want to branch out to other sectors of the economy. Now, again, it works when there are growth sectors. It doesn't work when there are no growth sectors. So we need to find the growth sectors, and there are growth sectors, significant growth sectors, digital and tech, green economy, automotive and electric vehicles components, social sector, social services, these are going to be critical areas of us to be able to look at going forward. Sorry, I'm talking as if I'm doing the keynote address, sorry about that. New approaches to planning and funding for demand-led skills. So how we're doing this is, we set up a number of work streams around this, and DED has established work streams on each of the priority areas of the ERRP, which is the 5 sectors. And those relate to automotive, agriculture, social services, and digital and tech, right? And part of this is an integrated approach to funding, where we've been able to raise money through the fiscus, and DED has raised the additional 100 million rand, so we're piloting 200 million rand. 200 million as first sets of this paper performance model, hoping to target about 4,500 young people. Let's see if it works. If it does work, we are able to roll that out to other sectors of the economy, right? So DED has recognized the need to establish a dedicated funding window for this. We are working with the National Skills Fund to look at unsolicited proposals around this. And we're looking at getting the Department of Employment and Labor Activation Program to be able to do that. So this is an interesting thing that does require for us to spend a bit more time and for us to be able to determine, real colleagues over here, whether we're able to roll this out to other sectors of the economy, what has been the impact, that intersection that I refer to around, the iteration process of research, policy, and implementation. And let's see if this works. The others I'm not going to touch on, and I want to just close, and this is just the local ecosystem development. Again, how do we facilitate greater partnerships among different stakeholders in an ecosystem? And this is what we're doing with the Department of Trade and Industry. We're trying to promote local economic development by trying to ensure that the ecosystem itself is conducive for opportunities. Instead of throwing money at the opportunity which is there, can we fix the environment that you're in to be able to do that? So one of the key environments is, can we create opportunities for you to have access to data, for example, or broadband? Because that's a big thing for many young people who want to start businesses, and whether they want to make an appointment at a hairdresser or not, or whether they want to do it via WhatsApp or on internet or on emails, these are important areas that we need to look at. So let's think about the environment. Do they require places for them to be able to do their businesses? And there are lots of public spaces that can be redesigned. So that ecosystem development is something that we think we want to look at, because there's over enough money. There's billions of rands being allocated to this. And again, this is about earning opportunities and moving people, transitioning from them learning to earning, that's there. And then the revitalized youth services, we've been able to We had a small target of 50,000, and we've already achieved in the last 3 months 44,000 of that 50,000 target. Again, one of those areas where we create this opportunity for you to be able to get some form of, first employment, get some income earned. First employment is important as a stepping stone for you to be able to get other forms of income. And this is just some of the achievements today, 2.9 million on the partnership. We've placed this quarter about 636 million. There are 500, this is interesting, right? So we've got 557 opportunity holders. This is the demand side of the economy. So we've been able to network and, we need thousands more, hundreds of thousands more, by the way, right? But we have 557 opportunity holders that are there, that are using that network and saying, here are the opportunities that I have. How can we place young people into that? We've secured, 358,000. Actually, we've doubled that because we've been able to get, that figure must change, because we've been able to get double that in placement. So of the 2.9 million people that are registered, we've been able to place about 800,000 people in the last 2 years. It's about a placement rate of about 25-26%, right? Many of them, or 69% of them, are filled by young women. Of course, this is targeting young people. And 30,000 of them have received non-financial support, and a lot of the other data is here. So this is the interesting things that we are doing around trying to target an intervention for young people specifically aimed at getting them from learning to earning, nothing else. We're not dealing with anything else about basic education. We want to create that opportunity right now for a young person that is struggling to find employment. So, Steph, thank you so much. That's the end of my presentation, and I hope that's helpful for us to be able to think through.
Thank you so much, Rudi. We really appreciate your input. I think there's a lot of exciting ideas, and as Rudi said, I think all of us who live and work in this country know that implementation is always our problem. So I think it would be really good to talk about that. We do have a bit of time for questions. One of our colleagues here from the Wits School of Education, and also a very close friend of Real, is always the first. So she was already asking me, is there time for questions? So I know that every time I do a presentation here, Francine is the first one with a hand up. It's a very robust intellectual environment here at the Wits School of Education.
I really enjoyed Mr. Dicks' presentation. Thank you very much. I'm sitting here pondering about, the many interventions that we have to, gather youth and these meta frameworks, which are fantastic, but wondering why we didn't start with the other leg to pull the demand before we started to get some hopes, perhaps, and expectations alighted of, almost 3 million young people. And then, while reflecting on that, I also wondered why, or maybe I might have missed it, of the 557 employers or opportunities that you might have, is government stepping up as the biggest employer? Why is that not reflecting perhaps some government positions? Thanks.
I'm Francine from the School of Education, semi-retired, I think. I just wanted to know, Rudi, again, this demand model and performance model. I mean, who does it really attract? And what kind of job do they get? I mean, is it internship? How long does it last? Is there progression? And in a way, you're not talking about the nature of the job. You're just talking about the earning, the learning and the earning. But I would have liked you to comment a bit more on the nature of that transition.
Okay. So Kama will help me on the second one, right? But I'll answer some of the first one. So, I mean, in actual fact, all those opportunities, 90% of them are in the government system. So what we've done, I used the one example and I didn't explain it fully. But in the presidential employment stimulus, we created about 560,000 opportunities, right, through the public employment programs, livelihood support and retaining jobs. But the biggest component is on the public employment programs. And our biggest program there is the basic education program. And you can again just do a search, you'll see that the the basic education program. And that's placing 300,000 young people at 22,000 schools. Now, we thought we were never going to get it right, as you can imagine. I was like horrified. It cost billions of rands. I was really horrified. I said, oh God, these guys are never going to do it, right? Lo and behold, towards the end of 2020, we've been able to get 300,000 in actual fact, the first phase, we got 320,000 young people placed at every single school, 22,000 schools. 10 to 15 young people that were placed over there through the basic education. The first phase of it was a combination of walk-ins, because many of them didn't have smartphones or data availability. So, and if they're in a rural area, let's say Springbok Pan out in Northwest, there's one school over there, you have to walk to school, right? You walk in there and you say, okay, I want to register for this opportunity, I've seen this thing, right? And then there was also a different other way of doing it. You could do it on the platform, on the SA Youth Mobi platform also. And you could do it through NYDS, Sarambe, and a number of other different platforms. But the vast majority of them had walk-ins, right? Walk-ins has a different dynamic, right? Because as you know, in our schools, your uncle works there, your auntie works there, your cousin works there. And so you are favored as a family member to get that opportunity. So we had a lot of large complaints. And so we wanted to take that discrimination away, right? The non-discrimination away, actually. And so, of course, what we did in the second phase, which was 270,000 young people, is that you had to apply using the platform. All 270,000 young people were placed using the platform, right? And so the public employment component is the biggest component right now that contributes to the demand side of it. What we need to do is that the public employment is just a small part of overall employment placements. And that's why we need to ramp up the demand side area, the opportunity side. So you are spot on about that. I don't think we can wait for the demand side to happen, because there's I'm going to contradict myself. Because there are not only supply constraints to the economy, and you think about, okay, matching, but there are structural constraints to the economy. There is insufficient demand, in my view, in many of the jobs that are there, right? So you have to find that spots of where you think there's going to be growth. And that's why we spoke about those 5 areas, because we think that's where the data shows us, right? Agriculture, digital and tech, automotive, if we switch to EV, the renewable energy sector, the social economy, particularly ECD, huge growth in ECD sector, right? And other parts of the social economy. In actual fact, Kate Phillips has been doing a lot of work around rolling out public employment through the Social Employment Fund. We had a little bit of money, I think about 800,000. We could create only 50,000 opportunities. This is NPO supporting work in the social economy, right? Oversubscribed by about 8 billion rand. So there are opportunities out there. Right? But if you look at the traditional structure of our economy, those opportunities are fading as people move towards tech, high tech, jobs become minimized, jobs become offshore. So you have to look at these kind of things that are there. Ransina and Carmel will help me here. So we're piloting the model in the digital and tech sector. So we think that's where so here's the trick, right? So you have to put out a call for proposals. And you have to explain what I did in 5 minutes, right? A lengthy document, which sometimes half ourselves, we don't understand it, right? But we want to test this model. So we have to explain how the model works and around a pay-per-performance model, which is a placement model, right? And that's quite important for us to be able to do that. Now, already just through testing the market space, we have seen there's quite a lot of interest of people saying, well, some saying, yeah, but how do I know that people are going to be placed? Well, that's the point about it. You have to take responsibility. If you want to train, you're simply not going to be paid for training people and hope to be paid. But what is your responsibility to be able to get young people to be placed in an opportunity? So it puts, in a sense, a responsibility on the industry. So we've been talking to the digital and tech sector. And we've set up this forum, what's it called again? Digital Work Accelerator, sorry. DWA, yeah. But we're having partnerships, and this is where it becomes important, Steph, is that partnership in understanding what happens in an industry where there are potentials for growth. And working with the industry and big firms in the industry to be able to ensure and see where we can lock up. Because they too have huge cost of employment. How do we minimize that cost and how do we create the right skill set so that they can be placed into that. So it's a pilot. We're hoping that it works in the digital and tech sector. We're hoping to place 4,500. Our initial request for proposals have indicated that if we do put it out, and we're about to do that, we are likely to place about 50, not even 4,500, 15,000 young people, right? So this is what the sector says they can place on 200 million. Now that's I'm sorry, I'm an economist, so I have to go back to my roots of being an economist. That's a good return on investment, if I should say it in that particular way. That the cost per job that you're creating, right, of 15,000, I think it's a relatively good place, and it's permanent jobs, because this is very, very important. So the sector has always been known for not having permanent jobs and low wages. And that has evolved over time, where minimum wages, average wages, for example, in the business processing outsourcing call centers are about 6,000 to 6,500 rand. It is permanent jobs. It is a growing sector. So I think this is very, very important for us to be able to test that. The trick is, can we replicate that elsewhere, in other sectors, automotive, green economy, in the PV sector, for example, in the wind sector? That's the trick, and I think this is the kind of work that we require to understand that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Bongani, master's student at Real at the moment. So having worked in an, sorry, Rudi, for bullying you. I know it's probably awful, but we have this opportunity. But having worked in an NGO before now that works with young people in the ICT space, I picked up a couple of issues in the sort of, you spoke about like tech career accelerators or digital career accelerators, which are very high touch programs that aim to intervene and upskill people with tech skills to make them ready for a tech-led economy. But the issue, remains that like a lot of businesses just aren't willing to take risks on young people unless there are a number of conditions in place. Number one, if they're yes funded, it means they get free labor, in which case they're willing to hire them for a couple of months because they're free, and then after that tend to not really keep them on, which obviously hampers their ability to gain work experience and things like that. And that unfortunately goes to the nature of how businesses work. They try to cut costs, and taking risks on young people who have coding skills and all of those things isn't really intuitive for them. So I'm wondering what the workaround is there. Is there a plan to increase funding to make sure that young people get more experience or not? But then the second issue I found is with tech is, there are a lot of solutions around like digital academies and blah, 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 but they vocationalize ICT skills to very, very specific and particular skills, whereas a lot of businesses will still hire from your Wits and your UCTs and Stellenbosches because they feel like if they're going to hire people with IT skills, they need to make sure they have math skills and statistics and all these very advanced scientific skills that unfortunately employers still prize over and above can someone code. So sometimes, I'm wondering what are the workarounds around that? Because businesses will always have the preferences that they have, yet these solutions claim that they can get young people employed in ICT and in tech roles that will always hire computer science graduates and not someone who did a 6-month coding course. So I'm really, really curious around what the workarounds are there. And yeah, once again, sorry for the pressure.
Good morning. So my question is, or maybe a question, comment / I don't know, but these initiatives are great in getting young people into employment, at least on a. Okay, is it? Kate, is it right? Closer. Okay, that's it. Yeah. So I was saying that I think these initiatives are great into getting young unemployed people into work and all of that starting to earn. I just wanted to find out from your own experience whether you are starting to have some kind of pushback from young people where they join into these kind of things, but then after a particular period of time, they are back where they started. So we're running similar initiatives that have a lot more to do with graduates. And there is a despondency that is starting to emerge, where young people are hopping from one internship to another for their whole working life. And they are pushing harder to say, if you're going to start an internship program, it must lead to permanent jobs. So I just wanted to find out what is your experience and whether there is any work that you are doing in that area to try and turn this thing around. Thanks.
No, thank you very much. I think. Oh. I'm Peliwe Lolwana. I'm from Human Resource Development Council of South Africa. I'm the head of Secretariat. And at least I've got one leg out of government, and I think I can, whilst my other leg is still in government. I think the project is quite very, very good, and we have seen the results. Keep it up, and I know it's not easy to get young people into job, especially in the economy that is shrinking. But there's one thing, Rudi, which in my previous life I could not succeed to do, but I think let me deflect it to you now that I've got one leg outside. The issue of industry scared of taking learners because of injury on duty. How has it been addressed? Because I know there are quite a number of companies who want to take the young persons, but they are scared of certain regulations that in case then the students get injured in the workplace.
I mean, other than being nasty to saying to employers, I mean, you have extremely risk-averse employers. It's not only about injury on duty. They just don't want to pay minimum wages. They don't want to have to saddle with leave pay, sick leave pay, with rights at work, you joining a union. And I think that those are a combination of different elements that makes it quite risk-averse for them to want to employ. So you need to find a way of how we incentivize employment opportunities. And I think these are some of the stuff that we're thinking through. So the YES program is one of those things, creating and reducing costs for job search, because job search is not only a cost for job search for the individual. Anybody that advertises 1,000 jobs, you'll have 100,000 people standing outside looking for their job. I mean, we've seen those queues, right? Now you have to process all of that, right? So you have to also reduce the cost of that. And the confidence in the ability that, the confidence in the ability of government to be able to deliver on what it says it has to deliver. Don't quote me on this. Sorry, is there someone here from the media? So I don't, please don't quote me on this one. But we don't do good in delivering on these kind of things. We clap hands when we do the most basic things. Say, we've done it. This is basic, right? This is nothing new. This is what we were supposed to have done many years ago. But you're now clapping for me, right? As if it's something that's new. We're supposed to have done this and designed these kind of interventions iteratively, so go back to the drawing board and do things differently. But I think that part of what we're trying to break through is that partnership of trust with the employer industries, and that works because I didn't believe we were going to get 557,000. Those employees that have joined, right? When we talk about opportunities there, those employees that have joined, they said, I'm prepared to register. This is government employees. This is private sector employees. This is NPO employees. We have done that. So we're going to have to build that. But unfortunately, the situation as it is right now is that I met an Uber driver the other day. He's 30 years old. He's still doing his third internship right now. Right? I mean, this is the thing. And I said, no. Actually, he's at this university, if I remember. Right? And he's doing his internship. No, it was at UJ, and he's doing his internship at Standard Bank. Right? Again, he's applying for a job, and he's hoping to get now firmly. But this is the thing. So what we do know from the evidence that you present to us is that first jobs do count. That is the most important. And many of these young people do not have an opportunity even in their first job, right? So once you have a first job, it counts as a stepping stone for you to have some experience of how you deal with the job, how you interact with the employer, your interpersonal skills, your ability to do the work, coming on time to work, right? Having a work ethic, and then you have a greater opportunity to be able to move elsewhere. And many of the opportunities are still slim, but once you have your first job, the evidence shows that you're able to move up the hierarchy of seeking employment elsewhere. But you still zigzag, right? You still move around from different places, and you come back to an internship when you're 30 years old again, and then you get a permanent job and you leave because you're not happy with the salary. But I think it's just important to understand that. So this is the reality, unfortunately, and don't worry, I've had worse situations, right? And it is the case. So the question of the lady at the back there, so yes, I mean, people are dissatisfied, right, when they don't progress, when young people don't progress and they don't have opportunities. But the one thing that we have found out is that young people who had no opportunity, so think about many of them who had no opportunity. They didn't know where to start. And you see millions of them out there, right, who have an opportunity now to access this thing. Now, I just wanted to give you a good example of it. In the second phase of the public employment program, right, of the schools program, we only had jobs for 270,000 kids at 22,000 schools, right? So this was the only opportunity for it to happen in every single community throughout South Africa. Now think about that, right? So for the first time, every single community knew about an opportunity that was offered by the public sector as a placement for young people in a school, because a school is in every single community, right? This is both higher education and primary education, right? So this was the opportunity that we created for those young people. There were over, I think it was 3.2 million applications, if I'm not mistaken. I may just be wrong about that. But 3.2 million young people had applied for those jobs for 300,000, if I'm not mistaken. So clearly, people got to know about this thing. And the opportunity that is presented itself, you are able to apply for that. So it is tough. I don't profess to say that this is the be-all and end-all. I don't profess also to say that this doesn't. But once you create an opportunity and you can get young people from learning to earning, the chances, exponentially increases for them to get earning opportunities elsewhere. The problem is when you're stuck and you're left matric and you're unable to do any form of post-school education and you only get employment when you're 27 years old, you are unlikely to find employment again, right? Once you hit 35, because once you hit 35, you're no longer a young person, and therefore people look at you, you discriminate. Some of us here are older than 35, we all get discriminated against. A younger person you can train. So this is quite critical to be able to. Now, the one other thing that I think that you've also raised is that, so I'm not just missing the fact that formal education, post-school education is important. Because post-school education, as we know, and we use different examples, Lumka will tell you about, if we get an engineer to work, right, there are 4 other journeymen that work with him, journey people that work with him, right? And plus that is multiplied by 3 number of unskilled workers that are there. So skilled workers that are formally trained create opportunities for formal, those who don't have formal education. Let me not use unskilled. Let me distinguish between formal education and someone that gets a skilling course, right? Like a coding course, a 6-month coding course. Because that's important. So yes, it's quite critical for us to be able to look at both opportunities. Employing young people that have the formal skills and educations, that they've gone through a degree course or a post-school education course, because they create an opportunity to employ 3 or 4 additional people that have not gone through post-school education, but have the necessary skills and have acquired that to be able to do the work that is there. So I think it's important to see it in that way. And that kind of interface and ability to understand that is quite important. And that's why when we talk about the BPO sector, because 13 weeks of training, right, at a cost of about, I think it's 50,000 K, if I'm not mistaken, right? And you have an ability to be able to move in the hierarchy within that. And while you're doing call center training, you're earning much better than minimum wages, and you have an ability to be able to upskill yourself. So I think it's important not to dismiss formal education versus, don't play it off. That's what I'm saying. I think there's an opportunity for both, and young people don't necessarily want to go into formal education. They want to do that zigzagging. So they'll earn 6K over a year now, and then they'll move again. like my son. You know, he's a classic example of doing that, right? Of earning money here, he saves it up, and then he buys him something nice, and then he says, okay. I said, what happened to the money? No, I'm not working anymore, but I gotta hustle here again, and I don't know what the bloody hustle is, but they use as languages, right? And of course, these are the kind of opportunities there. So thanks, Steph. I hope that helps in answering the questions.
We wanted this morning to give you a sense of the Real Centre, where it comes from, why it was started, what it's focused on, where it's going, and the context in which we operate, and some of the key challenges and initiatives in the space in which we research. So I hope that we did that, and you've got a good sense of what we're doing and why, and who are some of the people that we're working with. The session this afternoon is going to look at this kind of very thorny problem of our systems that try and match the supply of education, the supply from education, or the supply of skills with the demand in the economy, and where there isn't demand in the economy, what that means. We have, again, 4 people from government, very highly placed policymakers from different parts of our government, who are also alumni from Real, who are also going to be, we're going to have a conversation with them on some of the issues confronting our system, and we'll be sharing some of our research in this regard. When I looked at our program, I thought, oh my goodness, it is very government heavy. We do have a lot of people from government today and tomorrow, and I think you can see that we have a relationship with policy makers and policy implementers in government. I don't want to give the impression, though, that we only work with government. We actually also work with unionists a lot, and trade unions, and we also work with industry and industry leaders in our skills dialogues that Presha mentioned earlier. We did work across, but the way the program has worked out now, it's government heavy. Anyway, it's your chance to corner Rudi over lunch. We do have at the back of the room some posters which give an overview of some of our PhD students' research projects. So please do take some time to go and have a look at them, and the students will be available to chat and answer questions and engage with anyone who's interested in learning more about those studies. We have some posters on the side here and also in our offices, which reflect some of the key interim research findings. It's work that's still undergo from a very important partnership that we have with the P-SETA, where we're looking at skills for a capable public service, something that's really crucial. I think we all agree. So I want to invite you now to give a big round of applause to our 3 speakers this morning.